to the Minuteman Classroom, a series where we take a classroom-style approach to the basics so you have more time to spend in the field training with like-minded individuals from your community. This content is primarily inspired by Marine Corps doctrine and secondarily by Army doctrine, but may have been modified by the narrator in a way they think best serves the tactical citizen and the modern Minuteman in order to set them up for success. None of this content is new or special, but is simply a rundown of the basics to get everyone on the same page. My name is Jeremy and I will be your instructor for today. I am a Marine Corps veteran, a now full-time firefighter, paramedic, and a lifelong recreational outdoorsman, which leads us to our topic of conversation today, an introduction to fieldcraft and survival, a guide for the rifleman. There's a lot of, sub-niche categories within this kind of broad stroke title. You have fieldcraft and bushcraft and survival, and then you have SEER, and there's a lot that actually goes into this. And I really encourage people to pursue outside training opportunities to get a more direct experience with these sub-niche categories. It's one thing to go out into the woods and teach yourself how to build a lean-to or how to start a fire and do that kind of stuff. But if you're talking about something maybe more SEER related or, gathering and plant identification, stuff like that, you're going to want somebody who is experienced and is a more capable instructor than whatever YouTube video you might be watching. I definitely would not suggest going into the woods to try and do plant identification and go home with a handful of poisonous wild berries. So definitely seek outside training when it comes to this stuff, just to give yourself that bigger edge. So as an overview, we're going to talk about the importance of fieldcraft, environment and surroundings, water collection and treatment, fire starting, shelters, and then other skills to learn. So the importance of fieldcraft. Like the many skills that make up a good rifleman, there are many skills that make up an outdoorsman. By default, those working in a field environment should be able to protect themselves from the elements and, at least for a temporary amount of time, sustain themselves during a lapse in support and logistics. There's definitely this kind of notion through the modern conventional force that supply and logistics will never fail. But as we've seen from the war in Eastern Europe right now between Ukraine and Russia and the various other conflicts around the world, when we start getting more near peer, or we're at least fighting a force that may be smaller than us but has been able to exploit different capabilities, the supply and logistics chain can break down really fast, and you no longer have that direct line of support that you might normally be used to or a training standard in which you might have prepared for. During even GWAT, there were time periods where infantrymen, out far away from FOBs at combat outposts, either they have a breakdown in MRE deliveries or they're just so tired of eating MREs, they're going to local markets and they're buying, livestock and random bags of rice and doing stuff to spice up their own food because you're in the desert. You're not exactly hunting and gathering at that point in time, but you're using what is disposable to your environment. They're using ammo crates as shitters at that point. So being able to sustain yourself for some level of a period of time is going to be really important, whether you're a part of a conventional force or a guerrilla fighter hiding in the wilderness. Everyone should have a basic understanding of their environment and how to keep themselves alive. And that's what the really nice part is about the Minuteman concept, is that you're pretty much always going to be on your home turf. You know what the seasons are like. You know what the temperatures are like. You know how intense or not intense the rain is. You hopefully know what plants are native to your region. You know what the terrain is. You have that home field advantage. You're not preparing to deploy to go to another continent into a environment you've never been exposed to before or something you're not even familiar with. And this kind of brings us to the next thing, which is environment and surroundings. Without being in a survival situation, you can thoroughly prepare yourself if the need arose before ever actually going to the field. This starts with understanding your environments, and some things to consider before starting operations are, am I in a hot or cold season? Am I in a wet or dry season? What do the water sources look like in this area? Even within the United States, this question varies heavily from region to region. If you go almost anywhere in the eastern Midwest or the South, really even the Northeast as well, water is not an issue for us out here. We have a ton of lakes, streams, rivers, creeks, springs. They're all over the place. But you start going to the west side of the Midwest, you get to the plains, you get to the desert areas of the West Coast. Water is a whole different conversation for you, at least just on water access. What type of food may be available? Again, another very big regional thing. Does your area have a lot of native plants that are edible? You know, berries and, different types of leafy greens and stuff like that can be combined with other foods. How dramatically do temperatures change through times of the day? I even know, in the southern areas of Appalachia, up in the mountains, it may be, July, August, and it's 90 something degrees during the day, but it cools off significantly when you're in the top of those mountains. And it may drop down into the 50s or 60s at night in the middle of summer, just because that's what it does in the mountains sometimes. So you got to be aware of what temperature changes are like. And then what are the man-made and natural terrain features in this area I should familiarize myself with? Whether this is train tracks, this is infrastructure like hospitals and fuel stations, this may be rivers, it could be any of this kind of stuff. And this is what I was talking about before, that the Minutemen have a significant advantage in this topic of conversation because you're already on your home turf. You should have all of this known, and it should be second nature to you. So, water collection and treatment. Humans within relatively good physical condition can go approximately 3 days without water. Now, I will say with that, you can survive 3 days without water, but that does not mean you're going to be able to perform or be operational for 3 days. Once you pass that 24-hour window of no water and you're being an active individual, you're going to start to get the cramps. You're going to start to kind of have a bit of a mental switch. There's going to be things that set in that start to set you back. You'll live a little longer, sure, but you're not going to be able to perform. So regardless of what type of unit or force you may be, lapses in logistics can occur, which may delay water resupplies. Water is going to be a much bigger issue than food. You go 2 days without food, yes, you will be fine, especially those of us that are carrying around a little extra winter weight in the middle of summer. Understanding how to safely retrieve and treat water with both commercial products and bushcraft methods is vital. That says in, but it should say is vital. And what I mean by this is you have like Sawyer water filters, you have different types of like gravity filters, you have water purification tablets, you have all different types of stuff at this point that you can utilize to process water. Even, Canna Provisions at this point is a huge company that focuses just on water for austere environments. But there's also bushcraft methods, using various bandanas and handkerchiefs to, remove sediment from stuff, creating different filters based off of gravel, dirt, sand, greens, all of that kind of stuff. So when possible, plan for water contingencies, especially for the gear you utilize to treat water. You should always have more than one method of treating water. If your primary method of treating collected water is like some sort of gravity filter or some sort of like squeeze bag filter, then you should have, in addition to that, some sort of like handkerchief and water purification tablets as well, in case that becomes all clogged up, it breaks, you lose it, whatever it might be. You should always have alternative forms of treating water. Water is the key to good sustained operations, guys, whether it's a cold environment or it's a warm environment. So, health risks in the water. Health risks in your water may be determined by where your water is coming from, contamination of the water or stagnation of the water. So I won't go through the various things you see here on the screen. I'll allow you guys to read that off and familiarize yourself with it. Just know that not all water treatment options are going to cover everything or cover things the same way. At the end of the day, normally putting things through a filter and then either boiling it or treating it chemically is going to be safe. You want to kind of do that double bang for your buck to really treat water. And again, you got to know where your water is coming from. There's a lot of stuff that can make you very sick. Water is a great way to keep yourself clean, keep yourself hydrated, keep yourself going. But if the water makes you sick, then you're going to run into issues. So be aware of that. Selecting a collection site, pretty self-explanatory for anybody that's done any type of, outdoorsman style stuff. But selecting where you collect water from is as important as how you treat the water you collected, if not more so, because it may negate some of the work you actually have to do. Things that you should consider are running water over stagnant water, always. Stagnant water just breeds catastrophe and, different types of microorganisms that will be within your water. Upstream or upriver, always, especially if you're stagnant in an area for a while and guys are going to the creek or the river to hygiene and do all that kind of stuff. Make sure if you are collecting water from that same source, you are significantly upstream from where hygiene may be occurring. Spring or mountain runoff sources will be the least contaminated. This is very true, and it's pretty much always going to be running, but again, you still have to treat it nonetheless. And then security. If you're not in an area that you just absolutely dominate and it's not an issue, you have to have security when going into the water. 2 guys doing a water run, while it may be a little bit more low pro, may not always be the best option. Because if one guy needs some help with the water and he only brought a second buddy, and that guy's got to drop his rifle, congratulations, you now have no security. So make sure you bring an extra guy or two than what you actually think you're going to need. And depending on, how you're collecting, and this kind of goes into that last point on collection method. If you take 2 guys and you got to fill up 2 jerry cans, is each guy carrying a jerry can on their way back to camp or their way back to the vehicles? If they're carrying a 5-gallon jerry can, their rifle's probably not up, and one guy's going to have to be a nice, big, strong boy to be carrying both 5-gallon jerry cans by himself from the creek all the way back up the hill to the road or to camp or whatever it is. So make sure you just take a couple extra guys. I'm not saying you got to take the whole platoon to the creek. I definitely, although you'd have great security, it's just not necessary. But make sure you have extra hands for this kind of stuff. And then collection methods, are you filling gravity bags and you have some labeled dirty, some clean? Are you filling jerry cans? Are you filling just random buckets? Like, what are you using to collect? And how does it directly relate to the operations that you are currently trying to conduct? Treatment methods. Water treatment can be done through commercial products or makeshift methods made with miscellaneous items at your disposal. Regardless, you should have multiple contingencies for treating water. It must understand their capabilities and limitations. We talked about this. And you have commercial water filters, makeshift water filters, chemical treatment. You can boil. There's a lot of different things at this point in time you can do. It really just depends. 1, how creative are you? What's your budget like? How much room do you have to dedicate to various forms of water treatment? A lot of this is really going to be dependent on that. The bigger the organization you are working with, or the greater your supply and logistics chain is, the greater your water collection and treatment capabilities are going to be. Having a water buffalo within your organization is probably not a horrible idea to have, something that just can be pulled by someone's pickup truck. Fire starting. This is something I would think more people would be good at. And doing this kind of stuff with people for quite some time now, I'm always amazed at how poor people are at starting fires. And there's a couple different reasons why that is. So fire starting is a skill everyone believes they are good at, and in a controlled environment with unlimited resources and are well rested. That is a big thing. If you dump gasoline all over a giant pile of sticks in your backyard and then throw a match on it, that is not a good quality fieldcraft fire starting. That's just, redneck ridiculousness. However, fire starting can prove quite difficult whenever things lack on resources, the environment, different types of exhausting factors start to set in. All of your kindling and your fire starting material is wet. You're really tired. Maybe you're really cold. Your body temperature's starting to drop, and instead of being in the 97, 98 degrees, you're actually in like the 95 degrees point at this point. Your vision's starting to get a little blurry. You got a headache. You're slowing down. Oh, you're creeping towards 94 now. Like, you need that fire. So you need to be proficient at fire building, not just in a controlled, well-regulated environment. You have to be good at starting fire anywhere at any time. While the tactical situation demands may prevent you from building a fire, a survival situation may demand a fire. You should be prepared to start a fire anytime, anywhere. Carry multiple methods of fire starting. There's people that love their flint and steel. That's fine. I've used flint and steel. It works just fine. However, Bic lighters are extremely cheap, and you can carry about 10 of them between your person, your pack, and your kit. And you'll never use all 10. If you do, we're in a whole lot of other hard trouble at this point. So there's no excuse to not have quite a few lighters on your person. But you also have to look at alternative methods to starting that, keeping them protected, but also maybe some fire starting methods kept on your person. Little fire blocks, fire cubes, anything like that. So starting the fire, what purpose does your fire serve? Is this fire specifically just to cook some water to use with dehydrated meals or something like that because it's summertime and we don't need a fire? Is this a fire where we need to warm guys up because they fell in the creek and it's the beginning of March and it's still 40 degrees outside and we don't want guys going hypothermic? A lot of this is going to depend on what it is your fire is supposed to be doing. What methods are available for me to start a fire? Select the proper kindling and stage starters and growers. This is something I don't see people do that much, is they spend a lot of time gathering kindling and then really, really big logs. But they don't do that intermediate stage of, kind of what I call the fire builders. You have fire starters, you have fire builders or growers. And that's going to be your miscellaneous, 1.5 to 3 inch, twigs and whatnot you find on the ground and sticks, your little bit larger kindling and other type of accelerants. Select a proper site for the fire. Again, depending on the tactical situation, you may need to start a fire underground in some sort of a hole to try and mask your signature. You may be secure enough to just start it above ground. But make sure you're doing so in a dry place that hopefully has some sort of ventilation. Airflow is your friend when it comes to fire starting. And then prep the site for the fire. I see a lot of guys just randomly throw their kindling pile down on just green grass or just anything random. If you can, clear off the ground a little bit. Put actual logs down, and I'll talk about this in a second. Put dry logs down to create a barrier between the ground and your kindling pile. Just prep your site to make a more productive fire starting process. And then ensure proper sustainment of the fire. In order for this fire to really get going, you're going to have to babysit it for quite a while. This isn't at home where you've got a bucket of gasoline or a ton of unlimited commercial fire starters or a fire starter log or something like that. You're going to have to build this fire up a little bit and keep an eye on it for anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes before you can just throw some logs on it and walk away. Sometimes even longer if it's a wet environment. So this is kind of an example of what, and it's scaled down. I definitely would keep a lot more on hand than what you see here, but this is a good pile of a starter and grower material pile for starting a fire. All the way on the left, you have some leaves, and then you get into some pine needles, and then some straw. This is good kind of for making kindling itself, actually getting the fire going. Then you have some very small sticks. This is great to throw on top of that kindling pile when it really starts to catch from the beginning. And then above here, you start to see the more intermediate stages of kind of sticks and twigs and whatnot before you actually get to the more log and fire sustainment style material. And remember, you want to go up gradually in sizes of your stuff until you have a good little bed of coals and a really good heat source going. So, campfire lays every man should know. There's a lot of different methods for starting fires. I'll be very honest, I pretty much always either do TP or the log cabin fire lay. The log cabin fire lay is probably my favorite, and I kind of take a bit of the pyramid approach to it. So I'll put a solid layer of dry logs or kind of the larger materials down on the ground. And then on top of that, I'll put my kindling and my fire starting stuff. So that way, as that stuff burns and the coals kind of start to build, they're also going to catch fire for the larger material as well. And then as I build things on top, I apologize, I had to come back in. My dog thought it would be a good idea to come in with a squeaker toy and start making a bunch of noise. As I was saying, log cabin method is probably my favorite. And again, putting those larger logs down on the base of the ground creates a barrier between the cold ground, the wet ground, and all of that, and giving your fire somewhere a little bit more dry, and also helps promote airflow to really get that fire started in the earlier stages. And then really from there, even if you want to turn your fire into like the TP style, you can just start building the TP over top of your log cabin. As you can see from that picture, they have the TP on the inside of the log cabin. I prefer the TP on the outside. I mean, again, it just really depends what experience you have and what you have available to you. The best way to learn is to just get out there and do it. And then we have our common North American log chart over here on the right, or I should say wood chart. Um, Sometimes you're not going to know what type of wood you found on the ground. It's easy to find wood because you cut down the tree yourself. But when we're just miscellaneously selecting various stuff that's been down on the ground for Lord knows how long, you're not always going to know what type of wood it is. Probably most people have a lot of oak and probably maple just laying around on the ground. That stuff grows and falls and breaks off all the time. Um, you want to try to avoid things that have at least in the tactical environment, things that spark a lot, make noise, or stuff that has certain aromas to it. Um, you know, or really even smoke production as well. Things that are really sappy will smoke a lot. Things that are known to hold water more will smoke a whole lot because it's trying to get rid of all of that moisture. So just be aware of what you're really trying to do, and try to pick stuff that's going to burn easy for you. Shelters. So both in a tactical and a survival situation, shelter is crucial for long-term field sustainment. Never having a break from the elements can lead to physical fatigue, exhaustion, or illness. And this comes in a lot of different variations, guys. You may use lean-tos utilizing your tarp. You might have bivy sacks with the good weather covering. You might have actual field tents. It's really going to depend. But if you're in an environment that's not a static position with proper security and barriers, and you're in a hooch or a larger troop tent or even a fixed building, you're going to need something that protects you from the elements. Even during the summer, depending on your environment, you're going to want some sort of shelter over your head, if not to protect you from like rain or something falling. But if you're from the South or the Midwest, even during the summer, you wake up in the morning, it can be awfully dewy and wet out. And if you just sleep out under the stars, somewhere in the South or the East Coast or something, you're going to wake up and you're going to be wet, and your pants are going to be wet, and your boots are going to be wet. So having something over top of you, even just to keep the dew off, is nice. Selecting a proper site that fits both the needs of the mission and protects you from the elements may be difficult, but not impossible. Avoid setting up shelters at the highest or the lowest point of terrain. A lot of this goes back to your site selection for the various other tactical tasks that you have. Obviously, you don't want the lowest point of terrain because, well, you're kind of stuck when you're trying to fight your way out of your sleeping bag or out from underneath your shelter. And then the highest point, obviously, you wouldn't want either because then you might run the risk of skylining yourself, whether it be the silhouette of your lean-to tarp or your tent or whatever it may be. And aside from personal gear that can be used to make shelters, such as tarps, ponchos, whoopies, and mylar blankets, look to utilize terrain and nature to aid in your shelter building. This is going to be trees that serve as great tie-offs, rock formations, anything like that. Anything that can help you with the shelter field. So, tarp shelter methods, you have the lean-to, you have the diamond fly, the A-frame, the wedge, and the burrito. Honestly, the lean-to and the A-frame are probably the most popular. The A-frame I think is the best in my opinion. Low profile to the ground, provides a nice big wide open space underneath for you to keep obviously yourself and your gear, protects you from rain and moisture. The lean-to is nice during the summer when you really don't need to be covered all the way around. You're really just trying to keep the moisture off of you. You just got to be careful about setting up your lean-to too high. Because if the top of your lean-to is 6 feet off the ground, then it's going to be pretty obvious for somebody to be able to spot you. And then ensure you have proper tie points on your tarps, as well as a shelter kit in your pack, which includes various sides of paracord, a repair kit, little backup stakes. I go to Walmart and get those little silver or orange tent pegs. You can make like tent pegs and ground pegs and all that kind of stuff, or I should say stakes, in the woods if you like. Just break off some twigs or whatnot, break off all of the edgings and whatnot. You can use it. I like to have some backup options that are a little bit more reusable and easier to work with. That's just my personal preference. You using a tent stake in the woods that has an inch and a half of it showing out of the ground is not going to give away your tactical position. Other skills to learn. This is big. I talked about it earlier where guys need to get out and pursue other forms of education. And this would be ropes and knots, trapping, hunting and fishing, foraging, navigation. Land navigation is a big one. And this one you can kind of self-teach to an extent. But somebody with some experience that can set up land nav courses and all that kind of stuff for you, it's really helpful. First aid, obviously, is going to be a big fieldcraft thing. Everybody should be familiar with first aid. And then plant identification. This goes back to the foraging side. This goes back to identifying your various types of firewood, identifying poisonous plants like poison ivy, poison oak, all of that kind of stuff, and being aware of what is safe and what is not safe. So this is all I got, guys, for the Fieldcraft and Survival kind of intro class. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you have questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. If there's a class you guys want to see me do something over, by all means, drop it below, and I can create some learning material for this. But as always, guys, train hard, train often.